Today we are going to be working on evaluating expressions. It's very important that you pay attention to this today. This is extremely important when it comes to the things we will be doing for the rest of the year. You're going to have to get familiar with the words such as substitute and variable. A variable is just a letter that holds the place of a number we don't know yet, possibly, or something where we're going to put another in, substitute another number into. So don't get hung up on variables that I just don't understand variables. They're just a placeholder because we don't know what the number is yet, and we can't put a number in there if we don't know what the number is yet, because that would be dumb because we don't know the number yet. But sometimes they'll give us the number. They'll give us an expression, and they'll tell us to evaluate, and that's basically what this is. And hopefully we'll go through this slow enough to where everybody will understand it, and by the end you'll really get it. So let's go through a few of the beginning notes. And remember, pause, rewind if you're not getting something. Feel free to do that. I'm not pushing anybody to get this thing done in 5 minutes. There's no way you're going to get it done in 5 minutes. Take your time so that you understand this. So let's start at the very top here, evaluating expressions. What is an algebraic expression? It's an expression that it contains one or more variables. And I'm going to add one thing, no equal sign, because an expression has no equal sign, an equation does, because what are the first four letters of equation? EQUA, just like equal. So an equation has an equal sign, an expression does not. So you can't really solve expressions like we're doing today. You evaluate them for the information you're given, which kind of means find out what the final simplest answer is if you can. To evaluate, you substitute the variables with their given values, and I'll show you that here in a minute, and then follow the order of operations, PEMDAS, like we did the other day. I think a lot of you keep forgetting that. You got to keep going back to PEMDAS. So in our first example, we have 7x minus 2y. So, and then over here, oh, guess what? They're telling us if x equals 4 and y equals 3. That tells us, well, x is 4 and y is 3. So let's do that. So here's how we do that. We take the 7, just write it like it was. The x, we're going to put some parentheses. Here, this is probably the simplest way to do this. Get rid of your variables, x and y, and put in parentheses. And in their place, if x is 4, I'm going to put a 4 in there, because that just means multiplication, 7 times 4. And then I'm going to put a 3 in here for y, because they tell us y is 3. And then we just multiply. 7 times 4 is 28. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. Well, 28 minus 6, 22. Hopefully that was pretty simple and straightforward. Let's try number 2. Oh my gosh, there's exponents and stuff. I don't know what to do. Well, start at the beginning. Here's what I expect you to do. Rewrite your expression. I'm sorry, it's not an equation. There's no equal sign in it yet, or at all. And take out the variables and put in parentheses. So a squared instead is going to be a squared plus 2 times something. Well, they tell us a is 4, so instead of a, I'm going to put in a 4. They tell us b is 5, so instead of b, I'm going to put in a 5. And then I go ahead and do PEMDAS, order of operations. Inside the parentheses, I look at both sets of parentheses. There's nothing I can do inside the parentheses, because 4 is 4. I can't do anything to a 4. 5 is 5. I can't do anything to the 5. But we have that exponent. That's the E in PEMDAS. That's the second step. Okay, 4 to the second power. That just means 4 times 4. This tells me to write it 2 times and then multiply it. Okay, so I wrote 4 2 times and then multiplied, plus 2 times 5. Well, what's 2 times 5? 10. Okay, I'm just multiplying that. That's what that always means. A number right next to parentheses always means multiplication. Now let's go back. PEMDAS. We already did the P. We don't have any exponents for E, so we go to multiplication and division. There's multiplication. 4 times 4, 16. plus 10, 16 plus 10, 26. That's evaluating expressions. Okay, we're not technically solving them because they don't have an equal sign. We're evaluating them. Let's move on to number 3. Now I see all these negatives. Oh no, what am I going to do? Do it, go piece by piece, just like I said. Well, we know what B is and C is, so we got parentheses here. I got a -8. And what you might want to do, let's go ahead and let's not put any parentheses on this B because I don't want a bunch of parentheses. It starts to get busy. Parentheses don't really mean anything other than you're trying to separate things so they don't get confused. But a -B, that's going to be interesting. A -B, and B is -5, so that's a -5 plus 6, and this one I'm going to go ahead and put the parentheses in, and they tell us what C is 2. Okay, now we're starting to make some headway. Maybe you're a little confused, but don't get confused yet. -8. Remember, the two negatives, when you see a negative and a negative like this, together, it becomes a positive. So it's -8 plus 5 plus, and what's 6 times 2? I can multiply that. I just simplified over here. I just combined some stuff, or got rid of those double negatives and made it a positive. I didn't really do any math. I just took those two negatives whenever they're back to back like that, make it into a positive. 6 times 2 is 12. It's a lot simpler looking now, right? -8 plus 5. Remember, if you go on a number line, go to -8. So I'm over there on the left-hand side of 0, and I add 5. Which way do we go to add? To the right. So I've got to count backwards from -8, 5 units. So it'd be, you don't start at -8 counting, you go -7, -6, -5, -4, -3. So that gives me a -3 plus 12. All right. Now, the other rule with adding and subtracting negatives is if the signs are different, we subtract the numbers, 8 minus 5, so that gives us the 3, and then keep the sign of the number that's farthest from 0 or greatest absolute value. Well, then -8 is farther from 0 than +5. It's 8 units away versus the 5 units. So I keep the sign of the -8. So that's where I get the -3. Okay, so same rules. They all apply. Always in adding and subtracting. Now you might get confused on a -3 plus 12. I'll show you a trick that we're probably going to use quite a bit. Underline the sign with the number. Just like that. I underlined the -3 and the +12. I can move those around as long as I keep the sign that I underlined with the number that I underlined. So that +12 can go out front. That -3 can go to the back. Still the same thing. Well, what's 12 minus 3? That's a lot easier. It's 9. Okay? So there's different little tricks you got to do along the way, but just go step by step. You don't need to get all worked up about variables and exponents. They're not as hard as you think. Now this one seems like it'll probably be a lot simpler because there's only one variable. Well, let's work through it. -m squared minus 2m. So I'm going to substitute in that -m, I'm going to put a 6 squared minus 2 times 6. This is starting to get a little easier. Now remember, the little exponent tells me how many times I write the number below it. -6, -6. Then I multiply them. I always multiply. Exponents always are going to mean you multiply the number below it. Then I can keep going over here. This -2 times 6, I can go ahead and do that. That's a -12. Next thing I need to do is I need to multiply the -6 times a -6. Anytime you have an even exponent and you have a negative number down here, and 2 is an even number, and I have that negative down there, that means my answer's got to be positive because a negative times a negative is always positive. So my -6 times -6 is going to be a positive number. 6 times 6 is 36. And I bring down the -12, Anytime you have something that you didn't do anything with it, you bring it down to the next line. This is kind of like writing a paragraph with numbers, but we keep coming down. Instead of continuing a sentence at the end of the previous sentence, we move it down to the next line. So we keep moving things down. 36 minus 12, that is 24. So that wasn't quite as difficult as maybe you thought it was. Okay. Let's do, let's see how many more we got. I'm going to do a couple more for you. This one looks terribly difficult, right? Oh no, this is going to be hard. But let's just stick with it. Don't look at it and go, I can't do that. Let's stick with it. This is pretty simple. R is 19, S is 7. 1/2. R, we take out the R and put in 19. Plus S, well, we take out the S and we put in the 7. That's all we do. It's substitute. You'll also hear people say plugging in. You plug in the value for the variable. Same thing. Substitute, plugging in. Now we do parentheses because PEMDAS. I leave the 1/2 out front because I haven't done anything with it yet. It doesn't change. It doesn't go away. It doesn't disappear. Now you got to do 19 plus 7. Well, what's 19 plus 7? That'd be 26. Now there's a couple of ways you can look at this. 1/2 times 26, that just means half of 26, which I know is 13. Or if you really want to get technical, and put an arrow over here and go, okay, 1/2 times 26. Well, how do I make 26 into a fraction? 26 over 1. Now, I can try to reduce those. 1/2 I can't reduce because there's already a 1 in it. 26 over 1 I can't reduce because there's a 1 in it. So I can cross-reduce 1 and 1. Well, that's as low as those are going to go. 2 and 6. Well, 2 goes into 2 one time. 2 goes into 26 13 times. Then I just multiply straight across. 1 times 13 gives me 13. 1 times 1 gives me 1. Well, 13 over 1 is 13. Same answer. Okay? Sometimes the fraction, it does not make it harder. Half of 26 is 13. That's pretty simple to understand. Let's move on to number 6. So we have 2x, which is the same as 2 times x. Got to remember, when number in a variable, that always means there's, oops, I don't want to use that. It's always multiplication. Multiplication. You're going to see a dot for multiplication quite a bit from here on out. Sometimes you'll actually see the multiplication sign. Sometimes there won't be anything. It'll just be a number in parentheses. Okay? But you got to understand that's always multiplication. 2x plus -4 times y. That is what that means, -4 times y, because that variable is right next to the parentheses, so that means multiplication again. A lot of these always just mean multiplication. And remember, division always looks like a fraction, so that's the only two real things you got to remember. So let's start plugging some stuff in or substituting. X is -4, y is -2. So I'm going to put 2, I'm going to take out the x and put in the -4, okay, because they're the same thing. Plus -4 times, well, y, I'm going to take out y and put in -2. Now, I'm going to tell you something about parentheses right here. I could also do this. It doesn't matter. Parentheses are just keeping things apart and tend to mean there might be some multiplication involved if there's something right up against the outside of the parentheses. Well, especially when you got parentheses right up against each other, guess what this means? Multiplication. I'm going to put a little dot. Dot means multiplication. So we're going to go ahead and multiply. I don't have any more. I can't do anything inside the parentheses. I'm going back to PEMDAS. I don't have any exponents. So now I go to multiplication division. Well, I've got multiplication here, and I've got this multiplication over here. Okay. Well, 2 times -4, -4 and -4. 2 times 4 bads, that's going to give me 8 bads. So hopefully you understood that reference. So 2 times -4 is -8. Plus, and a negative times a negative is going to give me a positive. So I don't really need to write the positive. And 4 times 2 is 8. Okay, -8 plus 8. Well, guess what -8 plus 8 is? And you can do this. Here's underline the sign and the number, switch spots. As long as I take the sign with the number I underlined, I can switch them when I'm just adding and subtracting. Well, what's 8 minus 8? 0. Okay? Not terribly difficult. I'm going to do 2 more, and then I'm going to have you try to do the back. So let me do these last 2. I want to make sure I'm hitting examples of a lot of different problems. Well, R is 6. This should be pretty easy. So it's 2 times 6 to the 3rd power plus 6 to the 2nd power. Okay? So really what this means is 2 times 6 times 6 times 6 plus 6 times 6. That's really what that means. Okay, that 3rd power means I write it 3 times and multiply. That 2nd power means I write it 2 times and multiply. First I do everything, the exponents in parentheses. Well, 2 times 6 times 6 times 6. Well, I know 6 times 6 is 36, and I got to multiply by 6 again. 6 times 6 is 36. 3 times 6 is 18, plus 3 is 21. So I get 216 plus 36. So now I've got to multiply 2 times 216. 2 times 6 is 12. Carry the 1. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. 2 times 2 is 4. So that's 432 plus 36. So now let's add that. 432 plus 36. 6 plus 2 is 8. 3 plus 3 is 6. So we get 468. That wasn't that difficult. Just a lot of multiplying, a little bit of adding. Okay. Let's look at the next one. 8. 3a squared minus ab. What that means is a times b. So let's start putting some stuff in here. We know that a is -4 and b is -3. So we're going to write 3, put the -4 in for a, minus, and a is -4. You got to, this minus has to stay here, and this minus has to be there. Don't drop a minus. As soon as you drop one of those negative signs, it's all over. You've totally missed this problem. So make sure you're not missing those problems. And that other b is -3 again. This is not as hard as it looks. Let's do what's this first part. So I got this -4 squared. That means -4 to the 2nd power. -4 times -4. Negative times a negative is a positive. 4 times 4 is 16. So I've gotten rid of the exponent. This next part, I'm going to really simplify this for you. How many negatives do you see going this way? I see 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm going to get rid of my little lines because I don't want it to be messed up. But I see 3 negative signs. There's 3 negative signs. That's an odd number. That means if I multiply all those together, my answer's got to be negative because there's 3 negatives in a row right there. Okay, 3 negative signs. Then I just multiply 4 times 3. That's 12. How hard was that? I looked at the negatives that I was going to multiply together because that negative really means kind of like a -1 times -4 times -3. So we have a -12. Then we got to do 3 times 16. So 16 times 3. 3 times 6 is 18. Carry the 1. 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4. So we end up with 48 minus 12. Okay, 48 minus 12, that gives me 36. Not terribly difficult. Now, I kind of want to talk about this part a little bit more. I'm going to bring it down here, and I'm going to get rid of that 1. So we had a -4 times -3, right? Now, you could also say, okay, I'm going to leave this first negative alone. This one right here, I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to bring it down. I'm just going to worry about what's multiplying the 2 things in the parentheses. So we have a negative times a negative, right? What's a negative times a negative? It's a positive. I don't have to write the positive. Positives you don't always have to write unless you actually need a symbol between two numbers. But I could write it. I could say positive. 4 times 3 is 12. So this negative and a positive, when I combine a negative and a positive, I end up with a negative. Because remember, a negative and a negative gives me a positive. A negative and a positive gives me a negative. So that gives me a negative 12. So that's where this negative 12 really, if you really want to kind of tear it apart and try to figure it out, because that's where it goes. Because this came here, these two things became the positive 12. So I just ended up with a negative 12, or subtracting 12. Okay. So I want you to try the back by yourself. And once you are done with that, and just try them. If you're getting really confused by the exponents, try them, but don't get really, if you get really confused, skip it. But I want you to try the ones with the exponents, okay? We're not going to be doing a whole lot of exponents later on, but if you can do exponents relatively easily, or you kind of get it, it'll make everything else we do a lot simpler for you. So try to do them, okay? Like I said, if you get really confused, skip the problem. Once you are done with the back, and you're going to try to do all 8 of the back problems, you're going to grab the homework that's in the back and do the odd problems on the homework in the back. Okay, odd problems on the homework. All the problems on the back of this sheet. Okay, super clear. You are responsible for all the problems on the back. That's 9 through 16. So you have to do 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. And then the odd numbers only on the homework. Okay? And then after all that, then you can do Prodigy. You do not do Prodigy before you've completed the homework assignment. Okay,